Today's guest is Bill Steele, a former professional scouter at the local council level all the way up to the national offices, where his work included being head of the National Eagle Scout Association. He's a lifelong adventurer and explorer specializing in caving, and in that capacity has explored over 2,500 caves worldwide, many of them of considerable length and depth. He's also a co-developer of the Exploration Merit Badge, a recipient of the Distinguished Eagle Scout Award, and is a fellow of the National Speleological Society. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Eagle Scouts Worldviews. Today we have a very special guest. All of our guests are special, obviously, but I think you'll be quite taken by our guest, Bill Steele. He is a lifetime of scouting history, a lot of work with NISA, professional scouting, and a world explorer in caving. So I'm just going to introduce him right now to y'all. Bill, hi.
Thanks Hello, so everybody. Much. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you with us. Look, we always have a limited amount of time for these interviews, and I know you've got a lot of substance to share, so I'm going to start in, if that's okay, with the first question we'd like to ask is,
sure.
By any definition, you're an explorer, and the challenges of discovering new things in nature as a caver. You've mentioned in the past that scouting really enabled you to be a modern-day explorer. Exactly what is it you mean by that?
Well, from early boyhood, two interests were fixed in my mind: how interesting caves are and how I wanted to be an explorer. I became interested in caves by going in some tourist caves on family vacations, and became interested in the explorers through history, by reading books such as Kon-Tiki, about Lewis and Clark, Christopher Columbus. In fact, even before I could read, I'd asked my father to read those kinds of books to me because he had a pretty good library. He was an educated man. And my parents indulged my interest in caves by taking me to show caves when we went on vacation. They even called me caveman because I asked to go to them so much. And then when I was a Boy Scout, I found a way to combine my two interests, caves and being an explorer. I raised my hand when our scoutmaster asked for ideas for a week of what we called adventure camp. And I was only 13 years old. And he liked the idea of caving, and he assigned me to find an expert to guide us and get us equipped properly. And that led to me finding an expert where I lived at the time in Dayton, Ohio. And also through finding that expert, discovering literature about cave exploration, which I not only read a lot of at the time, but behind me you can see that I own a lot of. I got a pretty good library on the exploration of caves throughout the world, and also exploration itself.
I like that. Now, in our previous conversations, we learned that you and I have shared a little caving experience alike here in the south central part of Indiana, around the Bloomington area. There are a number of caves, and those are some of the first you explored, right?
Right. They're in northern Kentucky also. I grew up in a suburb of Dayton, Ohio, so it was pretty much the same distance to go both to northern Kentucky, where there are lots and lots of caves, and also southern Indiana. And between my junior and senior years of high school, there was a national convention of the National Speleological Society, and I joined that when I was 16 years old, just 6 weeks into being 16 years of age. And I was allowed to drive one of the two family cars over to Bloomington, Indiana, where Indiana University is, and attend that convention. And that really gave me some direction in life. I decided then I wanted to go to college at Indiana University, which I then did because they had a caving club and lots of caves around there. So I was in on exploring a good number of caves in southern Indiana, including Blue Springs Cave, which is a show cave near Bedford, and the deepest cave in Indiana at the time, which is named Parker's Pit down in the Harrison Crawford State Forest. And that particular cave was very challenging, very difficult, just because there's so many tight, narrow places in there. But I learned a lot of technique through that and got everybody through it safely. And that applied to what I am still involved with to this day.
Yeah, I've learned through the course of this program that people love to hear exciting stories. Is there a particular story from caving that is particularly memorable for you?
Oh, sure. Well, since I started caving as a teenager, I've been caving a long time, several decades, and I've written three books and two have been published. The third one's memoirs, and I'm still adding to that one. But of all the explorations that I've done, the accomplishment that stands out in my mind is actually included in this merit badge booklet because I helped make this merit badge happen, Exploration Merit Badge. It was launched 7 years ago this month, and we worked on it for a couple of years. It was a project I was involved with when I was on staff at the National Office of Boy Scouts America. And if you look at page 23 in here, I call that my page because 20 contemporary explorers were invited to write their story in what, 3 paragraphs. And let me read you the first couple sentences of my paragraph, because this is the story of an accomplishment that I'm extremely proud of. In 1980, think about how long ago that was, I was co-leader of an expedition which explored the first cave outside of Europe, over 1,000 meters deep. That's 3,280 feet. It was the 7th one in the world that deep. Today, there are over 100 caves known to be that deep. That shows the pace of exploration in modern times. But 1,000 meters in depth in caving is like 8,000 meter high peaks. Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world. K2 second, Annapurna's third, and so forth. There's 14 of those. That will never change. That's out here on the surface. They've all been mapped. There's 14 peaks in the world that are 8,000 meters high. There's who knows how many caves 1,000 meters deep. But I did lead the exploration of the first one in the Americas and the first one outside of Europe. And we're still working on that project. That's the one I'm really proud to talk about.
We'll share some contact information and websites and the like that will inform people a bit more about all the work you've done over the years. I'm sure some of the people watching are going to be thinking, how do you handle the thought of being that far underground with just rock all around you and it's just a little tunnel you're crawling through? Claustrophobia, were you ever uncomfortable? Did it take some time to get used to being in that kind of environment?
Well, yeah, but with a lot of experience, you learn technique, and you learn that keeping your mind focused and calm is of utmost importance. But it's one thing to get yourself through it; it's another thing to get everybody else through it. And I've said that something that always amuses me. I mean, I'm not a small guy. Um, I was an athlete. I've put some muscle on my body, and I'm always amused when I'm getting myself through a very tight, complicated place in a cave where I got to be calculated about how I move my elbows and my knees and my hips through it. And somebody behind me who's smaller than me says they can't fit. Well, that doesn't make sense, does it? I'm already through there. And also, I've convinced myself that anything I can get myself into, I can get myself out of. But I have learned, and I'll be there this weekend, matter of fact, in the longest cave in Texas, I have learned that what bothers people more than tight, confined places is when you have water filling the cave passage up to within just 2 or 3 or 4 inches of the ceiling. And that's a technique that I teach, and I will teach a couple people this weekend about how to keep your lips up against the ceiling and slowly move through there and keep your calm. In fact, I even get people to whistle sometime while they're going through there because it occupies their mind. They don't think about how scared they might be.
Yeah, one of the dangers I think a lot of people don't realize is caving in a wet, rainy time is probably not a good idea. Correct?
Yeah, you got to watch the weather. We'll watch the weather for this weekend. In fact, it's been rainy here in Texas, and I got a guy that lives near the cave. Cave's down near San Antonio, and he'll run out there tomorrow and make sure that of the water level in the cave. I've been trapped in a cave, and I got a lot of stories, of course, from thousands of trips underground, and have had some close calls, but here I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but I have been trapped in a cave before by high water because it rained real hard while I was in the cave, maybe, I don't know, 3 times, I think, and was almost killed by a flash flood one time. And that's in one of my books, the story of that. But here we are, made it
Yeah.
out, made the right decision with just seconds to go,
Yeah.
and
Have,
got
have,
through it.
have you had to incorporate much rappelling and rock face climbing as part of your caving?
Uh, yeah, sure. Repelling, because my specialty's been the deepest caves, the deepest ones. And the cave that I'm in now, organizing expeditions to and leading them in the field, and after this interview, I'll be working some more today on planning for the one that launches in mid-March, and will run to the 1st of May. I mean, that's the deepest cave in the Western Hemisphere, deepest cave in the Americas, the 10th deepest cave in the world. It's all ropes, and and it's easier to get down a rope, rappelling down a rope. Gravity does your work for you than it is to get back up those ropes. So you really got to have your technique down. And you don't climb a rope in a cave like you climb a rope in a gymnasium in PE class. No, you can't do that. Not hand over hand or wrapping your legs around it. You have these gadgets called ascenders that clip on the rope and slide up, but not down. So it's a matter of essentially walking up a rope like you do a ladder. You slide these things as you go. And of course, you get real good at it with a lot of practice. And I just had to tell a guy the other day that who asked about coming on our expedition, and I said, "Tell me what your experience has been." And he told me, and I said, "Well, it's not enough. Nope. Contact me in a couple of years. Go out and do a bunch more. You're not ready for this, and you don't really know what you're asking to get into."
Yeah. Yeah. It's there's a bit of a paradox going through my brain right now. Part of me says I would love an experience like that. The other part of me says run for my life before I even get pulled into it.
Yeah, it's not for everybody. In fact, that's why I say it's not crowded down in there.
Not a huge tourist trap. Hey, listen, let's change a little bit. I know that you were a professional scouter for several years and worked closely with NISA, particularly at a period of time that membership numbers exploded in growth. Could you talk about what was happening at the time that so many people joined NISA?
Yeah, I became a professional scouter um, later than most in terms of my age. I was 32 years old when I decided I wanted to have a career with the Boy Scouts of America. It meant so much in my life. And I've often said that I had two fathers, my biological father and my scoutmaster. He meant an awful lot to me. And then one time when I was exploring a cave in Tennessee, off the Cumberland Plateau in central Tennessee, I ran into a man who really impressed me, just how dignified he was, how well educated he seemed, and so friendly. And I asked him what he'd done in his life, and he retired as a professional scouter. And somehow, when I was a Boy Scout and even summer camp staff, I just didn't realize that there was a career there. Well, there's not a career for a lot of people. For every 1,000, this is a rule of thumb, for every 1,000 volunteers in scouting, adult volunteers, there's one person behind the scenes. That's the professional, kind of moving it along and tending to the finances and the laws that apply and so forth. And that just fixed in my mind that was something I was going to look into someday. And I finally did in my early 30s at 32 years of age. And I started a career 10 years older than most people who do, because they're usually fresh out of college. But I'd had a lot of interesting experiences, and I was already a fellow of the Explorers Club. I'd already done some world-class exploration, which the person that interviewed me thought was extremely interesting. And being an Eagle Scout and a former summer camp staffer, that helped me get the job. And many years later, there I was at the national headquarters. I'd been promoted right along up the ladder from local council staff to Scout Executive of Council, and then promoted to the national headquarters in Irving, Texas. And when I received a promotion within the national headquarters to associate director of the Boy Scout division, and working with advancement and Eagle Scout services and so forth, that included being director of NESA, National Eagle Scouts Association, which I had joined many years before. And after I accepted the promotion, I found out that a part of that was to conduct the first search for living Eagle Scouts. And that was a very interesting project. And we worked with an alumni company that searches out alumni and publish a directory, and they find them. They've got the means. They collect all publicly available data, dress changes, and so forth, and they're able to find, so they say, 70% of living people in the United States through information that's publicly available. So at the time when we looked into it, the BSA knew the whereabouts of 180,000 living Eagle Scouts. How? By either they were members of NESA or they were registered adult leaders. And I contacted, through the National Executive Board, I contacted two executives with insurance companies, and they ran actuarial studies and came up with a number that there should be about 1.5 million living Eagle Scouts. We only knew the whereabouts of 180,000 of 1.5 million. So we were out there looking for, as many as we could. And they managed to find 1 million of them who we contacted. And of those, something like, I think it was 80,000 joined NESA in terms of that reconnecting. But the main thing we were looking for was not necessarily NESA membership. That was secondary. The main thing was to reconnect with Eagle Scouts and get them back involved in scouting in some way. That was the most important part of that project, and it was really successful. NESA committees were formed across the country. We kept track of where they were in the councils, and there was a lot of encouragement to get them involved somehow as a volunteer in the local council, merit badge counselor, Eagle Board review, what have you. There's lots of different ways they can be involved. So that's how we increased the membership so well. And also through really good customer service. I had a staff that I just, they heard me on the phone talking to Eagle Scouts. They're my favorite people. And they realized if the director is that way, just utterly helpful, then we will be too. And in fact, when I had my retirement party, one of my staff members confessed that sometimes she'd stand outside my office and listen to me when I dealt with some difficult person. Eagle Scouts can be difficult, I guess. And, I told my staff, I'm the director. The tough calls are mine. Send them to me. And, and I'd turn it around.
Yeah.
I'd make them feel good somehow.
As I follow threads on Facebook and other interactive places online, essentially regarding NESA, I'm finding a fairly common theme of a simple question: what do I get out of NESA? And when I read the strings of responses, I find a lot of dissatisfied people because they're not getting anything from NESA to them. And I've come to realize that perhaps membership in NESA isn't about what you might get from NESA, but rather by what you can get by involving yourself with other groups of Eagle Scouts. And it seems that the most that people get out of NESA would come from affiliation with the local council organization, committee, chapter, whatever they're being called right now. What is your experience in that? Have you found that people get actively involved, they get more out of NESA membership because they're actually actively engaged themselves?
Oh, yeah. Well, as I've already mentioned, part of the project in reaching out and reconnecting with Living Eagle Scouts was to reconnect, get them back involved. And the best way that that can happen is if there's a active NISA committee in your council. Now, prior to me becoming director, in fact, some years before, it had kind of fallen by the wayside, I guess you'd say. There had been NISA chapters. And when we really looked at what NISA chapters did, it wasn't a whole lot to support scouting in the local council. In a way, it was a mutual admiration society. Pat each other on the back that y'all made Eagle when you were a youth. Well, that's nice, but what are you doing for youth today? So I took a BSA business trip to Honolulu one time. The only time I've been to Hawaii, and I met with the local council NISA committee, and I was impressed that they had a booklet that was a guide to how a NISA committee should operate. And it was exactly what the National NISA committee had in mind, but it wasn't quite so organized and published. So we asked if we could make that the national committee guide. And we enhanced it a little bit, but pretty much it was what that council was already doing. And basically what it comes down to is, NISA members should be supporting scouting in the local council. And there's a lot of ways they can do that. And that booklet's available, I'm sure, on how to operate a NISA committee. And such as not only Eagle boards of review, you could sit in with a troop board of review. You could be on the district board of review or a council board of review. Also, I've seen some really good Eagle Courts of Honor support groups, because an Eagle Court of Honor should be a very special event. And it's tragic when you hear about an Eagle that's just handed his badge at a regular Court of Honor. That shouldn't be the way it's done. It should be a real honor. It should be a special event. Family and friends should go. That's a major pinnacle of this young person's life. And on. There's all kinds of things. Now, there's a book by Michael Malone titled 4%, and that's about Eagle Scouts. And the reason that title was given to it is because currently 4% of scouts that join scouting become Eagle Scouts. 4%. 96% don't. Now, I firmly believe that if you have an active NISA committee that's supporting the subject of Eagle Scouts in all ways they can in local council, that percentage is going to increase. Why not 10? Why not 20? Why not 50? Why not keep a scout in scouting long enough to reach the highest rank and get the most out of it? And I'll even go back and make a comment about cave exploration now. And I have found in my many years of experience exploring literally thousands of caves, and some of the most complex ones in the world, the longest one in the world, Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. I'm going there just next month again. I have found that those that have the most scouting under their belt, the most scouting experience in their lives, are the best explorers. The ones with the most scouting are the ones with the best internal sense of direction. Imagine being in a utter maze where you can't see the sky, you can't see the stars, you can't tell which way the wind's blowing on the surface, yet you know which way's north. How does that work? It does. It's amazing. And I test people all the time in a cave, which way's north? And those with the most scouting, just there, that way. How in the world? It's just in them. They've got this internal compass, and they know all the twists and turns. They just keep track of which direction is north. It's pretty amazing. I've got it. I've got an incredible sense of direction. I'm an explorer.
Speaking of explorers, and I know that your orientation is looking down inside the earth, but I understand you had an experience with someone who explored the opposite direction, up into space. Can you talk a little bit about an astronaut that you had met at one time, and how that engagement and the conversation went?
Oh, yeah. given that I became the National NISA director, and when I stepped into that role, um, my volunteer counterpart, who is the volunteer president of the NISA committee, national level, was Steve Fawcett. And Steve Fawcett held the hardest world record there is to hold. He held the world record for holding the most world records. He'd blown a hot air balloon across the Atlantic. He'd flown an airplane clear around the world on one tank of gas without landing it. How's he do that? Well, you hold a whole lot of gas on the plane, and on and on. Very interesting guy. I was just, privileged to be working with such a fellow. Well, it wasn't long before he disappeared, and he was found later. He crashed his airplane in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California and perished. And I went to his memorial service at the Adler Planetarium on the shores of Lake Michigan, on the outskirts of Chicago, to represent the Boy Scouts of America. And I was the guy that worked with him directly at the time. And when I went in the memorial part of the memorial, in the planetarium itself, and I kind of scanned the room, I recognized some people. I recognized Neil Armstrong. I recognized Buzz Aldrin. I recognized Sir Richard Branson, and what's Carpenter's? I don't remember Carpenter's first name, but anyway, then we went in this reception hall, and there's about 200 people in there, and it was really interesting to see the body language of people. Here's one of the most famous people in the world, and definitely the most famous Eagle Scout, Neil Armstrong. And when he and his wife came in the room, it was just interesting to watch the way people were kind of jockeying for where he's going to go and being in position to meet him. And I was in conversation with people, and I didn't do that, but eventually I realized that he was right behind me. And so I turned around, and I was standing there with a national level volunteer who introduced me to Neil Armstrong. And the first thing I said to him was, I know about that caving expedition you went on with the British to Ecuador. And he was startled. He certainly didn't expect that to be said to him. And the interesting thing about it was he wanted to talk about it. There he was in the jungles of Ecuador and going down in a cave with these British cavers. And I kind of thought at the time maybe he was tired of talking about the moon. That was my thought. And Buzz Aldrin was there. I had a conversation with him. And another astronaut that I met, NISA has got quite a presence at national jamborees. And I'm proud to say that during my tenure as NISA director, we really moved that up to a higher level. And one thing we did at the, let me think, I think it was probably the 2010 National Jamboree. I think it was. No, 2013 National Jamboree. The first one at the Summit Bechtel Reserve. NISA had a stage in their big tent, and we had a prominent Eagle Scout speak every day. Well, one we had there was Charles Duke, and Charles Duke is one of the 12 people who have walked on the moon, lunar astronaut, and very interesting guy to talk to. Lives here in Texas now, in New Braunfels, Texas. Saw him just last fall. Introduced my own grandson to him because my grandson wants to become an astrophysicist and an astronaut. So here he was talking with a lunar astronaut. And then when after I retired, there was a retirees newsletter that's online now, like NISA's newsletter is online now, and not print. But there was a printed newsletter, and a fellow retiree interviewed me for that. And he asked me a surprise question. And that question was, what is your professional claim to fame? Well, after a 34-year career with all kinds of things that occurred at all levels, from, associate district executive in a neighborhood of San Antonio, Texas, to national staff, I had lots of stories, but I had come up with one. So I said I was the first professional scouter to recruit a volunteer while they were in space. And that was Mike Fossum, who was on the International Space Station. I'd met him before, um, and we needed somebody on a national level committee to review awards, and it wasn't a real demanding position. I thought he could probably do it while I was floating around up there, and he accepted. So yeah, it's been interesting to meet astronauts that have actually been in space. And Jim Lovell too. Jim Lovell had been the NISA president before I was director, but he was still around. And we brought him one time as speaker in San Antonio when I was finance director. We had him as speaker right around the time that the Apollo 13 movie came out. And he had so many requests to be speaker that I was asked, how in the world did you get him? And I said, well, I told him that this was a scouting event and that he had time for.
Wow. That's impressive. Hey, if we look at your history as a person, as a scout, as an Eagle Scout, as an explorer, as a professional scout, that amassed history, you must have some pointed messages for people. And I want to turn this time over to you right now to send a message out to all those people who will be viewing well into the future. What would you like them to know about you or about scouting or anything in general?
Well, I think you've already gathered that scouting has meant everything to me, really. I originally, well, I was a Cub Scout. My mom was my first den leader, and all the way through Cub Scouting, I had it in mind that I just can't wait to be a Boy Scout, and I want to go, because back then Cub Scouts didn't camp, and I wanted adventure and travel, and I got it. And I joined a really dynamic troop. It wasn't the first troop I joined. The first couple of troops I joined, to tell you the truth, bored me. You know, we went camping the same place they always camped, and I was looking for a lot of variety, and then I found it. And the third troop I was in was exactly what I wanted, and I stuck with it until I graduated from high school. And I just think you should give back, and you should be involved. Right now, I'm a merit badge counselor, and I counsel Exploration Merit Badge, so I'm one of the authors of that merit badge who counsels it. And I just love doing that. I love to talk with the youth that are thinking about exploration, and hopefully inspire them to do some form of exploration someday, maybe in the field like I do, or in a lab, which is also exploration. But be involved. Help it happen. Help it be the quality program that it always has been. It just takes quality people to be involved. It takes mentors. It takes the involvement of wholesome adults to guide scouts through the program and get them to Eagle. Increase that. Help increase that percentage from 4%, which is low, to a lot higher that make it to Eagle. And I'm thrilled the girls are earning Eagle now. Just very happy about that. I think it's a good move.
Yeah. One of the, I think, a constant message I want to send out in this program is that people don't have to dive in full-fledged to become involved with scouting. It doesn't need to be a full-time volunteer position. Just a little bit of time on a regular basis could make all the difference in the world and the lives of people across the country. Hey, Bill, thanks a lot. We appreciate your time today and wish you all the best in your continued exploration. Be safe in the caves and keep an eye on the weather. Thanks again for being part.
Okay, thanks a lot. Take care, everybody.
And that'll do it for this episode of Eagle Scouts Worldviews. Thanks to Bill Steele for his time, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye now.